It was a Tuesday, because of course, disaster loves a weekday. I remember the exact time, 7:43 p.m. The kind of time that sticks to your memory like a cold draft under a locked door. I had just poured myself a glass of whiskey that I didn't even really want. Habit more than desire. The house was quiet, too quiet, the kind of quiet that feels rehearsed. Cynthia, my wife of 8 years, was humming in the kitchen. Not a melody, just a sound. She always hummed when she was guilty. I'd learned that around year 3, right after she crashed my car and blamed it on a tree that allegedly jumped out. The doorbell rang. "Are you expecting anyone?" she called out, a little too quick. I wasn't. And I'm not a suspicious man by default. But there was something about her voice that night. Sweet but brittle. Like someone trying to make small talk while standing on a landmine. I opened the door. He was young. Early 20s, maybe. Sharp suit. Clean jawline. Hair gelled with the kind of confidence you don't earn, you inherit. He looked at me like I was the opening act before the real show. "You must be Mason," he said with a grin that had no business being that smug. "Depends who's asking." He extended his hand. "I'm Brandon. I'm, well, I'm Cynthia's personal trainer." I raised an eyebrow. Cynthia didn't work out. She wore yoga pants the way a firefighter wears a helmet at brunch, for show. I wasn't aware she had one. He smirked again. "You are now." It hit me right then, not the full betrayal, not yet. But the scent of it, like ozone before a lightning strike. The guy didn't come here by accident. No one shows up at a married woman's door unless he's either confused or confident. And Brandon? He didn't look confused about anything in life. From behind me, I heard Cynthia's heels clicking across the floor like a countdown. "Brandon," she said, fake surprise painted all over her face. "I didn't think you were coming till Friday." "Yeah," he said, still holding my stare. "I thought I'd surprise you. Thought we could discuss your, routine." Her routine. Right. "Well," I said, stepping aside. "I love a good performance. Come on in." Brandon walked in like he owned the lease. Cynthia's smile flickered like a dying bulb. That was when I knew. She hadn't told him I'd be here. She thought I'd be grading papers or at my Thursday poker game, which, funny enough, was still on the calendar, even though it was Tuesday. They were caught. Both of them. But you wouldn't know it from the way they acted. She offered him water. He declined. They sat. I watched. "So," I said, voice even, "how long has this personal training been going on?" Cynthia hesitated. Brandon didn't. 6 months, he said. "Give or take." Cynthia winced. "Brandon." "What?" "He deserves honesty." I had to hand it to the kid. He had guts. Stupid guts, but guts. "And what exactly have you been training her in?" I asked, leaning forward just enough to make them both sweat. Brandon chuckled. "You know, the usual. Cardio. Flexibility. Repetition." Cynthia looked like she wanted to crawl inside a wine bottle and never come out. Here's the thing. I didn't lose it. Not even close. That would have been too easy. No yelling. No smashed whiskey glass. No, how could you s? Just a quiet nod, like I was watching the pieces of a puzzle fall into place. Because this wasn't the moment I fell apart. This was the moment I started planning. Brandon sat there on my couch, legs crossed, posture relaxed, like he was the main character in a show I didn't sign up for. Cynthia hovered beside him, her hand twitching like she couldn't decide if she should touch his arm or wring her own neck. I sipped my whiskey. Slowly. Let them squirm. "So," I said, calm as a judge on a slow docket, 6 months. Impressive. That's some real dedication. And here I thought Cynthia didn't like sticking to routines. Her eyes shot daggers. "Mason." "What?" I shrugged. "I'm just admiring her commitment." Brandon smirked like he'd just scored a point. "She's actually been making a lot of progress. You should be proud." "Progress," I repeated, setting my glass down. "Now, that's interesting. Because I always thought progress required honesty." Silence. Thick. Like wet cement. I leaned back, steepling my fingers. "Tell me, Brandon, do they teach loyalty in whatever certification program you got that polo from? Or is that an elective?" He chuckled. Cynthia glared at him like he'd just let the wrong card slip during poker. "Mason, stop. You're being ridiculous." "Ridiculous," I echoed. "So, let me get this straight. This," I gestured between them, "is all in my head. A figment of my overactive imagination." She crossed her arms. "You're twisting this. Brandon is just a trainer," I cut in. "Sure. And I suppose the reason you started wearing perfume to yoga was so the mats didn't smell like sweat. Brandon shifted for the first time. Not much, just enough to tell me he wasn't as bulletproof as he wanted to look. Cynthia, on the other hand, doubled down. You're insecure, she said flatly. Always have been. Maybe if you spent more time focusing on us and less on your little games, I wouldn't have needed a trainer. I finished for her. That shut her up. Her lips pressed together, so tight you'd think she was trying to hold the whole story in with just willpower. I stood, dusting off imaginary lint from my sleeve. You know, I was planning to head to poker night. But this is much better entertainment. Brandon smirked again. Wrong move. I looked him dead in the eye. Tell me, Brandon, does it ever bother you that you're just the side dish? Or are you too young to realize the entree never leaves the table? That one hit. He blinked, his jaw tightening. Cynthia snapped. Enough, Mason. I smiled. Oh, I'm just getting started. Because I wasn't just one step ahead. I was already planning the endgame. And neither of them had the faintest clue what was coming. Cynthia stormed into the kitchen after Brandon left, muttering something about how I always make a scene. I let her rant. She needed the illusion of control. Like a cat hissing at a mirror, she didn't realize she was fighting a reflection of her own guilt. I followed her in, slow steps, calm face. You know, I said, if you were going to cheat, you should have picked someone smarter. Or at least someone who doesn't wear Axe body spray. She spun around. It wasn't a cheat. It was a connection. I laughed. Not loudly. Not cruelly. Just enough for her to hear how absurd that sentence sounded in the light of day. A connection? I raised an eyebrow. You mean like Bluetooth? She didn't laugh. She never did when she was the joke. That night, she slept in the guest room. Or pretended to. I didn't check. I had other things to do. Because, see, I hadn't been blindsided. Not really. The humming, the perfume, the sudden gym membership despite her hatred of cardio. It was a trail of breadcrumbs. She thought I'd just been too dense to follow them. But she didn't know I'd already installed software on her phone. She didn't know I'd mirrored her cloud account 6 weeks ago. She didn't know I had 3 months' worth of texts, photos, and calendar events cataloged in a folder called Exit Strategy. You don't stay ahead of a liar by confronting them. You stay ahead by letting them believe the lie is working. That night, while she dreamt of whatever future she imagined with Brandon, or whoever else had her attention when he wasn't around, I was building my timeline. I wasn't just looking at what she did. I was looking at when. The texts went back further than 6 months. They started 11. Different names. Different apps. Brandon was just the latest season in the long-running soap opera called I Deserve More. There was a Trevor in November, a Dan in February, and at least 2 labeled just fun. I closed the laptop and exhaled. Not because I was broken, because I was certain. She wasn't a mistake I married. She was a pattern I ignored. And the worst part? She still thought she had the upper hand. 3 days. That's how long I gave her. 3 days to stew in guilt, or more accurately, in her delusion that guilt would never catch up. 3 days to believe she still had the upper hand, that I was licking my wounds, maybe drafting a let's talk text, probably rereading our wedding vows like some lovesick fool with a soft heart and a weak spine. She didn't know that while she was watching reruns of her lies, I was writing the season finale. On the 4th day, I made breakfast. Not a peace offering. A performance. Blueberry pancakes, fresh squeezed orange juice, coffee just how she liked it, 2 sugars, no cream, and a spoon she never used but insisted on having just in case. I plated it all with care and even warmed the syrup because, as she once said, cold syrup ruins everything. Seemed fitting. When she walked into the kitchen, her eyes darted around like she was checking for hidden cameras. "What's all this?" she asked, tightening her robe around her waist like modesty still lived here. "Breakfast," I said, flipping a pancake with a nonchalance that made her flinch. "Thought we could eat together, like we used to." She stood there for a beat too long, unsure whether this was forgiveness or a final meal before metaphorical execution. And I didn't blink. She sat. We ate. I let her talk. It was incredible, watching her try to resuscitate a version of herself that had died the moment Brandon called me bro. She asked about my work. I answered. She mentioned she might see a new therapist, one specializing in emotional alignment. I nodded. She laughed a little too hard at a joke I didn't make. And when she finally took a breath, I gave her just enough rope. "You know, I said, gently. Maybe we did lose touch. Her eyes lit up. Hope. Not in me. Never in me. But in the idea that she could keep everything. Me. The house. Her little after-hours exercise programs. I've been thinking the same thing, she said, resting her hand lightly on mine. Maybe we just got comfortable. Comfortable. That's how she described it. As if marriage was a pair of shoes she wore too long and blamed for her decision to dance barefoot in someone else's apartment. I smiled. Maybe we should do a weekend away, I suggested. Just us. Clear our heads. She nodded so fast it almost made me laugh. Somewhere quiet, she offered. Perfect, I said. We picked a place. Upstate. A cabin she'd always wanted to rent. She texted her Pilates group chat about being off the grid for the weekend. She even posted a story of us packing the car, complete with the caption quality time, quantity texts. Adorable. She thought we were healing. She thought I was buying it. But here's the thing about traps. The best ones are the ones they walk into smiling. The cabin was charming, rustic, filled with faux warmth and real hardwood. The kind of place influencers go to disconnect, while still finding just enough signal to upload perfectly framed photos of hot cocoa and knitted blankets. We got in just after dark. She lit candles, poured wine, and queued up a playlist called Relationship Reset. I almost choked on the Pinot. We played board games. She let me win. Twice. Then she lost on purpose, giggling like we were dating again, and she still liked who she was when I looked at her. Around midnight, she leaned against me on the couch, bare feet, glass in hand, that smug little half-smile returning. You know, she whispered, we could start over. Clean slate. I looked at her, all calm. You want that? I do. Then let's make a promise, I said. One final reset. No more lies. We tell each other everything. Her face faltered, just for a second, but it was there, like a flicker before a light bulb dies. Still, she nodded. Of course, she said. I have nothing to hide. I let the silence do the work. 5 full seconds. Then I leaned forward and said, so how long has it actually been going on with Brandon? She blinked. A tiny twitch of the corner of her mouth, like a driver hitting black ice. Her voice cracked slightly. I told you. A few months. Right, I said. And before him, was it Dan? Or Trevor? That was it. That was the moment her world shifted. Her glass wobbled as she set it down too fast. What are you talking about? Come on, Cynthia. I've seen the texts. The cloud backups. I know about the hotel in March, the dinner in June, the conference that wasn't a conference. I know all of it. She froze. Not angry. Not sad. Just caught. And what surprised me most? She didn't even try to deny it. Her voice dropped low. So what now? I stood, walked to the fire, tossed in a piece of wood. Now, I said, now you relax. We enjoy the weekend. When we get home, we move forward. You're not leaving me? She asked, genuinely stunned. No, I said. I'm letting you. What she didn't know was that while she'd been making a mess, I'd been quietly, methodically cleaning up. Financially, emotionally, logistically. I had access to every account, knew where every password lived, every transaction, every hidden account, even the burner card she used at that overpriced boutique when she was shopping with her sister. And I wasn't going to torch her. Not yet. Because pain is temporary. But consequences? Consequences are beautifully permanent. Cynthia thought the cabin weekend was the beginning of our healing. In reality, it was the end of her safety net. The morning after our little fireside confession, I woke early, brewed the coffee, and set her cup on the nightstand. I kissed her forehead gently, not because I meant it, but because nothing unnerves a guilty person more than kindness. She blinked awake, smiled hazily, and whispered, "You're being so sweet." "Just trying," I said. And with that, I bought myself her trust, or at least the illusion of it, long enough to finish what I'd started. Here's the truth. I'd already been running what I called the ledger for 2 months. The ledger wasn't a book. It wasn't a file. It was a 3-tiered folder system on an encrypted drive I kept in a place she'd never think to check. Inside the casing of my old PlayStation 3 that hadn't worked in years. She thought I was sentimental for keeping it. She never knew it was the safe for her undoing. Inside, I had everything. Screenshots of texts, call logs, emails she'd thought she deleted, receipts from girls' nights that looked suspiciously like 2-person dinners, photos, nothing indecent, just enough to burn plausible deniability to the ground. Every breadcrumb she'd left, I'd collected. And I'd put dates, times, and names next to each one. Not because I wanted to wave them in her face. No, because when the time came, I didn't want her arguing about interpretation. I wanted facts so sharp they'd cut the lies out of her before she could even try to dress them up. Back at the cabin, she cooked us breakfast. Eggs too salty, bacon undercooked. Guilt does that to a person. She filled the silence with small talk. How the mountains were pretty, how maybe we should do a couple's retreat sometime. I nodded, smiled, pretended. But while she talked about rebuilding, my mind was already on the lawyer I'd quietly hired 2 weeks earlier. A quiet man named Lewis Crane. The kind of lawyer who didn't advertise on billboards. The kind who only worked by referral and who had a reputation for being 3 moves ahead of anyone foolish enough to sit across from him. Lewis already had the ledger, already had the timeline, already had my instructions. Secure the house, secure the accounts, leave her nothing but the receipts of her choices. I wasn't going to scream, beg, or throw her clothes on the lawn. No, Cynthia was going to leave this marriage not with a bang, but with a polite, calculated silence that would haunt her more than any shouting match ever could. The drive home was oddly peaceful. She hummed again. Different tune this time, softer, like she really believed we were fixed. I let her, because the best revenge isn't loud. It's quiet. So quiet they don't even hear it until it's already over. When we got back, she unpacked while I checked emails. In reality, I opened the shared bank app and moved the last of the joint funds into an account she didn't know existed. Not stolen, mine. Every cent traceable. Every move legal. She thought she was living her double life on borrowed time. What she didn't know was that the loan had already come due. 2 days later, she called from work. Want me to pick up something for dinner? Sure, I said. Surprise me. She came home with Thai food, smiling like she hadn't in months. We ate, laughed a little, even played a board game afterward. To anyone else, it would have looked like a couple on the mend. But I noticed the little things. How she turned her phone face down every time it buzzed. How she excused herself to the bathroom just as Brandon's name lit up her screen. Everything okay? I asked casually when she came back. She smiled, too quickly. Yeah, just work stuff. I nodded. Good. And then I waited. The next Saturday, she told me she was going to a yoga retreat. Overnight thing, she said, stuffing leggings and tank tops into a gym bag. I kissed her cheek on the way out. Have fun. She smiled, relieved I hadn't questioned it. What she didn't know was that I'd already installed a GPS tracker in her car weeks earlier. A simple, legal, $30 magnetized tracker you could buy online. She wasn't headed to any yoga retreat. She was headed to a hotel 2 towns over. Brandon met her in the lobby. I watched through the app on my phone as their dots overlapped. I didn't follow. Didn't need to. I already had the footage. A discreet PI, courtesy of Lewis Crane, had been tailing her for a month. Every dinner, every hotel, every smile she thought she'd gotten away with. Documented. Stamped. Sealed. That night, I didn't sit home stewing. I went out with friends. Laughed. Ate good steak. Slept better than I had in weeks. When she came back the next morning, smelling faintly of a cologne I didn't own, I greeted her with coffee. How was yoga? I asked. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Good. Relaxing. Glad to hear it, I said, handing her the cup. You deserve it. And I meant it. She did deserve it, just not the way she thought. The following week, I made my move. I scheduled a dinner. Just us. Her favorite restaurant. She dressed up, wore the earrings I'd given her on our 5th anniversary, probably thinking this was a peace treaty. Over dessert, I pulled a small black folder from my jacket. What's that? She asked, her fork freezing midair. Just some notes, I said, sliding it across the table. She opened it. Her face paled as the first photo stared back at her. Her and Brandon, arms wrapped around each other outside the hotel. Then another, a receipt for 2 at a restaurant she claimed she'd gone to with coworkers. Then a printout of a text. Can't wait to see you tonight. He'll never know. She didn't speak. Just sat there, eyes darting over the evidence like maybe, just maybe, if she read it fast enough, it wouldn't be real. Finally, she whispered. You. How did you? I leaned in, calm as ever. Cynthia, you don't need to worry about the how. Just the when. Her lip trembled. The when. The when you'll be moving out, I said. Her breath caught. I smiled. Don't panic. Everything's already handled. The accounts. The house. Your things are packed. You'll have enough to start over. Just not with me. She shook her head, tears forming. Mason, please, we can. No, I said firmly, folding my napkin. You made your choices. I'm just showing you the bill. The waiter brought the check. I signed it with a steady hand. She sat there frozen, like a statue made of regret. And as I stood, I added, don't worry, Cynthia. I'll even let Brandon help you carry your boxes. That's what personal trainers are for, right? Cynthia didn't move out that night. That would have been too easy. No, I didn't want a storm. I wanted silence. And silence takes patience. When we got home from the restaurant, she sat on the edge of the bed, mascara smudged, still in her dress. She tried to speak twice, words dying on her lips before they formed. I didn't stop her. I didn't need to. Instead, I said, I'll sleep in the guest room tonight. Her eyes widened like she'd expected me to pack a suitcase. Walk out. Slam the door. Something loud enough to give her the drama she thrived on. But I didn't. I left her alone in the master bedroom, her kingdom of lies, while I went down the hall, calm as a surgeon washing his hands before an operation. And that's how it went for the next 3 weeks. We lived like polite roommates. She'd make dinner. I'd thank her. She'd ask about my day. I'd answer with the kind of detail you give a stranger on a bus. She tried twice to initiate intimacy. I smiled and said, I'm tired. And every night, I watched her sink deeper into the realization that I wasn't raging, wasn't begging, wasn't threatening. I was done. That scared her more than fury ever could. Because when you fight with someone, you still exist to them. But when they go quiet, you're already dead to them. One morning, I left a folded envelope on the kitchen counter. Cynthia, she called, holding it up as I came back from my run, sweat still clinging to my shirt. What's this? Your new budget, I said simply, pouring a glass of water. Her eyebrows knit together. She opened it. Inside was a neatly printed sheet with 2 columns. Mortgage, utilities, groceries, insurance, paid. Spending, entertainment, personal care, on you. She blinked. What does this mean? It means I'll cover the essentials until we sort everything out. But the extras? That's your responsibility now. She laughed, a brittle, nervous sound. You're kidding. I took a slow sip of water. Do I look like I'm kidding? Her face fell. You can't just cut me off. I set down the glass, calm. Cynthia, I didn't cut you off. You cut yourself off. I'm just drawing the line where your choices end and mine begin. She didn't answer. She just stared at the paper like it was written in a language she couldn't read. Later that week, she tried calling Brandon while I was in the next room. I could hear her through the thin walls, whispering furiously. He knows, she said, voice low. Pause. No, he's not yelling. That's the problem. Pause. I don't know what he's planning. He's just quiet. I almost laughed. Quiet. It's funny how people think silence means weakness. In reality, it's the loudest answer you can give. By the second week, she started to break. I miss us, she said one night as we passed in the hallway. I nodded. I miss who I thought we were. She flinched. No fight back. Just flinched. By the third week, she was spiraling. Cooking elaborate meals I didn't ask for. Wearing perfume to bed. Sending me long texts about remember when stories, as if nostalgia could patch a ship that had already sunk. I replied politely. Never cruel, never warm. Just polite. And that's when the real trap snapped shut. One Friday, I came home with a folder. She perked up like a dog hearing the word walk. What's that? She asked, eyes hopeful. Documents, I said, laying it on the counter. Everything Lewis needs. Her face drained. Lewis. My lawyer. She swallowed hard. You really talked to a lawyer? I raised an eyebrow. You didn't think I'd wing it, did you? She reached for the folder like maybe she could stop whatever was inside. I let her open it. Inside were copies of the ledger. Receipts. Screenshots. Bank statements. The PI photos. Her voice cracked. You planned this. For months, I said, while you thought you were ahead of me. She covered her mouth with one hand, shaking. So that's it. You're divorcing me. Eventually, I said. But not yet. Her eyes widened. What do you mean not yet? I leaned closer, lowering my voice. See, Cynthia, you don't deserve a clean break. You deserve to live with the weight of not knowing exactly when the axe will fall. Tomorrow. Next week. Next month. You won't know until it's already done. Her lip trembled. That's cruel. I smiled. No, Cynthia. That's fair. From then on, she lived in limbo. Every time the phone rang, she flinched. Every time I left the house, She asked where I was going, when I'd be back. Every unopened envelope on the counter made her chest tighten. She was trapped, not by me, but by the uncertainty she'd built for herself. Brandon, by the way, he didn't last. I knew he wouldn't. He stopped answering her texts after she confided that I knew everything. Funny how bold young men shrink when the game stops being fun. By week 5, she wasn't humming anymore. She was quiet, truly quiet. And that's when I made my final move. I set up a dinner. Not romantic, strategic. At her favorite Italian place. She dressed up again, desperate, mascara already thick enough to waterproof tears she hadn't cried yet. We ate in silence. I let her stew. Then, mid-meal, I slid a manila envelope across the table. "What's this?" she asked, her hands trembling as she opened it. Her face fell. Inside wasn't divorce papers. It was a single sheet of paper with 4 words typed in bold. "You keep the house." She looked at me, stunned. "What?" I leaned back. "It's all yours. The mortgage, the utilities, the endless little fixes. I transferred everything into your name." Her mouth opened, closed. "But the payments." "You'll figure it out," I said calmly. "You always do when you want something badly enough." She shook her head. You're leaving?" I smiled, finishing my wine. "No, Cynthia. You're staying. I'm the one starting over. You get the memories, the mortgage, the gossip, the empty rooms." She blinked. "You can't just." "I can't," I cut in. And I did. "By the way, the utilities switch tomorrow. Don't forget to pay the gas. Winters get cold here." Her fork clattered onto the plate. I stood, dropped a crisp 50 on the bill, and said, "Dinner's on me. Mortgage is on you." Then I walked out, leaving her in the candlelight, not with rage, not with closure, just with silence and a bill she couldn't return. The first week after I moved into a small downtown apartment, she tried calling every day, sometimes crying, sometimes angry, sometimes pretending everything was normal. I answered none of them. Instead, I let her voicemails pile up like a tragic playlist. "We can fix this. You can't just leave me with all this. Mason, please, I'm sorry." The house, her castle, started to turn on her. The mortgage draft bounced the second month. The HOA sent a letter about uncut grass. The water heater broke, and for the first time in 8 years, she had to call a repairman herself. Funny thing, she'd always told me she wanted the house if we ever split. Said it made her feel secure. I gave it to her, and it was eating her alive. I wasn't cruel. I didn't cut her off from the bare minimum. She had her savings, her car, her job. But the life she thought she'd coast on with me carrying the weight? Gone. And the Brandon boy? He ghosted her so hard you'd think he'd joined witness protection. About 3 months in, I ran into her at the grocery store. She looked smaller. Not physically, just less. Hair pulled back. No makeup. Sweatshirt instead of the designer coats she used to parade in. She spotted me first. "Mason." I smiled politely. "Cynthia, you look good," she said, eyes flicking to the groceries in my cart. Steaks, good wine, fresh fruit. Hers was full of store-brand frozen dinners. "Thanks," I said. "You holding up?" She bit her lip. "Not really." I nodded. "That's tough." She looked like she wanted to scream. Instead, she asked, "Do you ever miss me?" I tilted my head. "I miss the version of you I married." Her eyes glossed. I walked away before the tears fell. That was the moment I knew I'd won. Not because she cried, but because she realized I wasn't hurting anymore. And she was. 6 months later, an envelope arrived at my apartment. Handwritten. From her. Inside was a letter, long, rambling, desperate. Apologies stacked on apologies, dripping with regret. She said she'd been lost. She said she'd do anything for another chance. She also included an invitation. Dinner. At our house. Curiosity won. When I arrived, the place looked sad. The yard overgrown. Paint peeling on the porch rail. The inside smelled faintly of mildew and desperation. She'd cooked. Tried to make it fancy. Wine. Candles. Soft music. She smiled weakly when I walked in. "I wanted to show you I've changed." We ate. We talked. She begged. I listened. At the end, I set my glass down and said, "You know, Cynthia, you were right." She blinked. "About what?" "That I got comfortable. That I didn't notice things. I've been thinking about that a lot." Her eyes lit up with a fragile kind of hope. "So we can try again?" I leaned in. "No, but you've convinced me of something important." Her face fell. What's that? I smiled. That you'd make an excellent real estate agent. Confusion flickered. What? I slid a folder across the table. Inside were documents from Lewis, the final papers. Not divorce yet. A sale listing. You're selling the house? I said calmly. Market's hot. You'll walk away with some cash. Enough for you to start over. Her mouth dropped. You can't make me. I can, I interrupted softly. Because you can't afford to keep it. And you know it. Her hands trembled as she looked at the numbers. The overdue notices. The utilities. The mounting debt. I stood. Think of it this way, Cynthia. You always said this house was your dream. I'm just helping you wake up. The house sold in 3 weeks. She walked away with less than she imagined, but enough to get a small apartment. I never yelled. Never humiliated her. Never sought revenge in the way movies show it. My revenge was quieter. Cleaner. The woman who once mocked me for being boring now sat alone in a beige one-bedroom, scrolling through photos of a life she threw away. The mortgage gone. The status gone. The audience gone. And me? I thrived. New apartment. New friends. New peace. One night, months later, she texted me. Just one line. Do you ever think of me? I stared at the screen, then typed back. Only when I need a reminder of what freedom costs. And that was it. No screaming. No slamming doors. No dramatic farewell. Just silence. The cruelest revenge of all.